Listen, welcome, friends. Let's start. Tony Greenstein, long-term activist in support of Palestine and other left-wing causes, Jewish comrade, expelled from the Labour Party was it for anti-Semitism at the end of the day, or did they start off with that and do you for something else?
But well, it was part of the anti-Semitism smear
yeah,
campaign.
yeah.
It was more for, yes, it wasn't really for anti-Semitism. It was for abuse, I think is the best way of describing it.
Yes.
For instance, I said that Louise Ellman was the MP for North Tel Aviv. And that was certainly held to be anti-Semitic because it was dual loyalties.
But listen,
Uh,
Tony, before you move into it, before you launch into it, let's just say that the trigger for today's meeting is I think you're a serial expulsee, and a noble position that is. But you've just been suspended by the Green Party. The charge is you got a communication from them to say the basis of the decision was you have, quote, a documented history of anti-Semitism. It's made worse because it includes court decisions and, I don't know what the hell this has got to do with it, recent terrorism charges. So that's the communication you got from the Green Party. Will come as a bit of a shock to people who thought that it was moving very much in a pro-Palestine direction. It raises all sorts of issues. It's an incessant barrage against anyone or almost anyone who advocates for Palestine. We have no choice but to fight back. Tony,
yeah,
the floor is yours, and then we'll answer any questions that people want to post in the chat as we go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for inviting me, Mick. Uh, yes, the basis of the proposal, which in essence is to expel me, I think that's quite clear, are 11 words, and it comes from some unknown Zionist, I presume, in the Brighton Party. Uh, with As with anything, when a Zionist says something, you can be sure it's a lie because the only way they get away with what they're doing is by lying, lying, and lying again. I mean, there are so many examples. I don't think I need to point them out, given what's happened in the genocide. But there are two major lies within those 11 words, which is not bad, really. 5.5 words for each lie. The first is there a documented history of anti-Semitism with reference to court cases. Now, of course, the Zionists have documented at length my anti-Semitism, which amounts to anti-Zionism, nothing more. When I was recently accused by Oliver Kahn, a particularly disgusting ex-Times journalist, of being a notorious anti-Semite, I said, well, quote just one thing I have said that's anti-Semitic, and of course he couldn't. He referenced the libel case I brought against the campaign against anti-Semitism, which was which failed because our judges, of course, err towards Zionist groups on all occasions when they can. But the campaign against anti-Semitism defended itself, and it had two options under the Defamation Act 2013. If you are accused of making a libelous or defamatory statement, you can either say it's true, section 2, or if you can't prove your defamatory statement, you say, well, it may not have been true, but it was the opinion of an honest person. And the campaign against anti-Semitism took the latter path. It said that their view was the view of an honest person. And how is an honest person defined? It's someone who isn't malicious. In other words, the burden of proof switched to me. Instead of them having to prove it was true, I had to prove that they were malicious. And that is a very high legal bar. And given it was a judge and not a jury, because juries have virtually been abolished in libel cases, I was unable to prove it. But at no time did the court rule on the merits or the substance of the case. They simply accepted that the statement was made by an honest person. Therefore, I lost the case. And so that's the first lie, that it's court decisions have said I am anti-Semitic. They haven't. There's nothing. The second is terrorism cases. Well, the first case, in which I received 9 months imprisonment, was acting as a getaway driver for Palestine Action when it attacked or tried to attack the Shenstone Elbit factory. Uh, there was nothing terrorism about it. It was a criminal damage charge. I am now being charged with terrorism under Section 12(1) of the Terrorism Act. And the charge is inviting support for Hamas. But if you were to look at the 4 tweets that they are giving in evidence, they support the right of the Palestinians to mount a resistance operation on October the 7th. Only one of them even mentions Hamas, and that is to say that they should be congratulated on mounting a brilliant campaign. Nowhere in my statements do I say I support Hamas. On the contrary, anyone who goes through my blog and looks at my comments about Hamas will see I am very critical of them politically. I criticise them on a number of levels. The use of torture, the attack on Palestinian youth, on women, and so on. But in a sense, what my view of Hamas is irrelevant. I see Hamas not as a terrorist group, but as a resistance group. I don't have to support them politically. I didn't have to support the IRA, but I support the right of all resistance groups to resist colonial oppression. And of course, I would support the right of Hamas and the right of any other Palestinian group to do that. So there's nothing terrorist about that, because the British state has redefined terrorism. We know that because 3,000 people plus have been arrested for supporting Palestine Action. And Palestine Action isn't, in anyone's book, a terrorist organisation. But because it's destroyed property, it comes within the terrorism definition. So it's the old Humpty Dumpty saying, really, that words are what I say they are. The only question is who is master. So that's the sum total of the allegations against me. I mean, there's no truth in them. But of course, they're not the real reason the Zionists have objected to my membership of the Green Party. It's because I'm anti-Zionist, and even worse, I'm Jewish. And therefore, I give the lie to the idea that if you support the Palestinians and oppose Zionists, you must be anti-Semitic. Whereas I
So,
think
Tony, you've been suspended for effectively for supporting Palestine Action,
yes,
and for supporting the right of colonized people
resistance.
to resist.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
Green Party has been getting a lot of coverage in the media for their leader moving very much to the left, supporting Palestine, coming out as a bitter critic of Israel, calling for a cancellation of trade deals. But I don't think it helps them to recruit and grow and maintain their position ahead of Labour in opinion polls if they're disciplining somebody for supporting Palestine Action, attempting to interdict the arms supply. What do you think? Is this not very much counter, um, not effective, right? An own goal.
well, it is an own goal because they have been, in particular, appealing to Muslims and others who oppose genocide in Palestine. It was on that basis they won the Manchester's, Denton and Gorton by-election. Uh, and so they're maintaining a balancing act because they are a bourgeois party, an establishment party at the end of the day. The Greens, I mean, historically, of course, Zach Polanski has upset the apple cart in some ways, but historically they wanted to green capitalism. They didn't want to overthrow capitalism. They don't see capitalism as inherently destructive to the environment. And so they go along with the, if you like, bourgeois politics. which is that you mustn't challenge the established system. You must work within it. There's that kind of narrow Overton window. And
But
someone who challenges Zionism, and this is why Zach Polanski's pulled back from saying Zionism is racism, because Zionism has been the established policy of British imperialism, the British government, ever since, well, 1903, really, and certainly 1917 with the Balfour Declaration. It's now part and parcel of United States imperialism, and we're wedded, joined at the hip with the United States. So there is no way the British government, as presently constituted, can say that we don't support the Israeli state and we don't support Zionism. And the Green Party is not willing to go down that path, which is why it still supports NATO, for instance, why it still supports the IHRA misdefinition of anti-Semitism, which conflates anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. So the Green Party is engaging in a delicate balancing act. I think that's the best way of putting it.
I mean, if we agree with what you've just said, or even if we don't, they need to attract a layer of people, not just Muslims, but young people who are increasingly bitterly critical of Israel and tend to support Palestine action. They need that layer of people. So this would seem to be a known goal. Can we exert pressure, given that they've had an influx of people who were attracted by Polanski's views? Is there the possibility of exerting pressure on the Green Party to reconsider this and to try and push them in the direction of opposition to Zionism per se?
Well, I think it depends, because I think that the attitude of the Green Party leadership will be that it's nice to have all these extra members, but we don't want them to influence the direction in which the Green Party goes. In that sense, I think their attitude to the membership is not that different from Starmer and Rachel Reeves. If you remember, Rachel Reeves openly welcomed the departure of all the Corbyn members. So I'm not sure that the Green Party wants to democratise itself. It is at the moment quite an undemocratic party internally. That's how this suspension and proposed expulsion has come about, because it's up to 12 people who are elected in a very mysterious way. Uh, and there's nothing really democratic about that. The membership isn't included. In fact, it's interesting that any discussion of the membership by the membership of my suspension is ruled out of order on Green Party discussion lists. So in Brighton, a Green Party discussion list, members put comments supportive of me, and the moderator, Joe Skeeping, who's a teacher of critical history, critical ideas and thought, but doesn't seem to display much evidence of it, instantly removed it, as did the other moderator. So they do not want to involve the membership in these wider questions. So I think it's a battle between the new and the old. But you have to bear in mind that, in my view, that the Green Party isn't set up as a campaigning party, but an electoralist party. And I mean, it's classified. I'm a Marxist. I would see it as a petty bourgeois party. It's not based on the labour movement. It doesn't have any form of class analysis. I mean, there are socialists within the Green Party and there are anti-imperialists within it. But I think they are wary and worried about the attacks of the media on them. It's not just me. All sorts of candidates for council, in particular Muslim candidates, have been attacked as anti-Semites by trawling through their uh, social media history. And this is really part of the Corbyn playbook, because they did exactly the same during the Corbyn era. They never, of course, trawled the social media history of the right wing, because if they did, they'd come up with some quite fruity stuff. But when it comes to people who oppose genocide, then they trawl it. And my recommendation would be that no one's social media history is trawled because anti-Semitism is what you do, it's not what you say in the end, unless it's a particularly egregious case. Also, I mean, the problem is that many supporters of Palestine do believe there is something Jewish about Zionism. And therefore, when the Zionists claim that all Jews support the genocide, people take umbrage at that and make comments which maybe are not right on, but they're not anti-Semitic. They don't display hatred of Jews as Jews. And that's the traditional Oxford English Dictionary definition of anti-Semitism: hostility or prejudice to or discrimination against Jews because they're Jewish. If it doesn't fit into that template, it should simply be disregarded.
Well, you're
But
right. We have to distinguish between people who are motivated by hostility to Jews
yeah, yeah,
and those
absolutely.
who accept the Zionist narrative that virtually all Jews support Israel. Contrafactually, I mean, make
Mm,
a big distinction there. But Tony, my main point, a point I would make here is this: an electoral party is always tending to fudge and to soft sell and go for votes above everything else. But the current situation we're in is 2.5 years of genocide. We've got an insane person in Washington. We've got America and Israel coming up against coming into the possibility of a very major defeat in the Straits of Hormuz. Experts
mm,
talking about the possibility of Israel responding to a real harsh defeat with nuclear weapons. I'm not saying they will, but it's in the frame. So
mm.
there's a mood at the moment. There's a fear. There's a real moving of the political categories. I mean, it's a political earthquake in British terms for the Greens to pip Labour in the opinion polls. So
Yeah,
surely in
yeah.
that situation they may want to compromise, and we wish Tony Greenstein would go away, but they also have to get votes, and they also have to give something to this new layer of members they've got. I think it's very unstable, and this might be a situation where we try to pressurise the Green Party or
Yeah, no,
members or branches.
uh, I agree with you. There's a common belief that the only way you can win is by tacking towards the centre. But I think one thing Corbyn did prove in 2017, that with a radical manifesto and by actually putting your politics forward, you can actually win people. It's not true that by being, if you like, moderate, fudging what you say, uh, that you will attract support. On the contrary, people support a clear and radical position, whether it's on Palestine or whether it's on the economy or whether it's on civil liberties or anything else. And that actually tacking to the left and towards an anti-imperialist and anti-Zionist view is much more likely to attract support than temporizing and fudging and muddling your message, because then you just simply get confused with every other party. So my message would be to Zach Polanski, uh, stay on message and don't compromise, because it's when you compromise your politics that actually you lose support, you don't gain support. And actually, the illustration of Thatcher, uh, she spoke out, and although we didn't agree with her, she was very clear and she gained support because of that. As I say, Corbyn in 2017 got 40%, which is still double what the Greens have today. So if the Greens have any sense, they won't muddy the waters and they won't confuse people by, if you like, toning down their politics. However, the Green leadership is a conservative Green leadership, and I have no illusions in where they will go. And that is, of course, part of the problem. People see the Green Party as a radical party, but there's not been a great deal that is radical about it. It's radical in comparison with the other parties, but it hasn't made a break from the establishment consensus. And we see that really over terrorism. It hasn't called for the repeal of the Terrorism Act 2000, under which thousands of people now are being prosecuted or have the possibility of being prosecuted. Uh, and There are other examples as well, notably the reluctance of Zach Polanski to openly say that Zionism is racism. Again, he has temporized and said, well, Zionism today is racism, but it didn't used to be. Whereas anyone who knows anything about Zionism will know that Zionism has always been racist from the word go. It was initially racist towards Jews, even before Palestinians came into the equation, because it held they couldn't live where they were born, because they were strangers in their own land. And they were accused by Jews, and they were seen by Jews as anti Semitic, a form of Jewish anti Semitism. And then, of course, when it was settler colonial, it couldn't help but be. And the worst racists were the Labour Zionists, and they were the ones who carried out the Nakba. And the idea that there is a good and a bad Zionism is an absolute myth. You can see that. I mean, when October the 7th happened, the Labour Zionist president, Yitzhak Herzog, said they're all guilty. There are no innocents in Gaza, which is exactly what Netanyahu was saying.
But it's about direction of travel, isn't it? You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Zionism was a colonizing and dispossessing movement from the word go. But I think we can live with somebody who is moving towards who adopts a position which I disagree with, that Zionism today is a racist ideology. But there was some, it was better in the past. That's a position we can live with, we can debate, we can challenge. But to actually say that Zionism is racism is surely a big step forward. And that brings me to the point I'm trying to make here. I mean, you and I I've spoken to Labour Party branches, even in Edinburgh, not so many years ago, where the leadership is completely pro-war, engineers wars, starts wars, doesn't just concede to them, but we still try and relate to the party members in the branches, and we can go there and win them over. So surely, given the influx of new members, however naive, but they've got a good impetus behind, they've got a good motivation. We should be orienting on some of these Green Party branches and fighting back in the way that you're suggesting, but aiming it at Green Party members.
I don't disagree, and I certainly think we should. But if my experience of Brighton is anything to go by, the structures are carefully controlled, and members don't really have a great deal of power. Furthermore, they're even worse than Labour Party branches in that the Green Party is primarily an electoralist party, and it's not based, as the Labour Party was, on the trade union movement either. So I think there are significant differences, and there are significant class differences as well. It is primarily a middle class party, and so I think there will be a much greater difficulty in doing that. It's not to say we shouldn't try, and given the Green Party's increased its membership from about, I don't know, 60,000 to 220,000,
Mm.
there are a lot of exiles from the failure of Corbyn to build your party. I mean, that was a tragedy in a sense, that Jeremy Corbyn acted as a recruiting sergeant for Zach Polanski. By the way, he's all but destroyed your party. So that is the context. So yes, certainly we should appeal to people who've come in, as well as many people who've been there for some time. I mean, a number of people have contacted me to say they've been a member of the Green Party since the 1990s and they're appalled at what's happening.
Yeah.
So there is that audience, but it may be more difficult to get to them given the structures of the Green Party, and we're seeing that, I think, very clearly with this disciplinary process, whereby I'm fed absolutely no information. They refuse to respond to my queries, and they put given 11 words, and if the rumours are correct, they will move quickly to expulsion without a hearing. So democracy in the Green Party is at a premium.
Yeah, it's really shocking. Tony, back to your other more fundamental point. You're absolutely right, of course. And probably most of our viewers will understand it. But it was an axiom of Zionism before they fell upon the people of Palestine that Jews shouldn't stay in Europe, should get the hell out. They bought into anti-Semitic assumptions in a big way. And can I just say, I remember, so how do we respond to these incessant fake anti-Semitism attacks? Some people think it's a distraction. Well, sorry, it was quite a few years ago. I was traveling in Scotland with a very prominent Palestinian thinker. And although it's 10 years ago, he was arguing, don't get involved in fighting back against anti-Semitism attacks because it's a distraction from BDS. Now, that argument's got much, much weaker now, but you still hear it. But I think we need to respond and see this as a central fight, for any Palestine solidarity movement. And the axiom of Zionism, right, which is inherently anti-Semitic, surely we need to push that to the front, don't we? We need to be aggressive in our fight back and not just reactive. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. I mean, I resigned from the UK Palestine Solidarity Campaign when, in essence, it changed its constitution to erase opposition to Zionism. Zionism is central. It's the guiding ideology of everything that Israel does. And to fail to oppose Zionism is, in the end, to fail to oppose settler colonialism and everything Israel does. And that was the big mistake of the Oslo Accords. It believed you could make peace between, if you like, the lion and the lamb. You can't do it. The lion will devour the lamb in whichever way it chooses. And if the lamb believes it's making peace, then it will live through the consequences. And that's the same with Zionism. I mean, Zionism is not. I mean, people think that Zionism and being Jewish are one and the same thing. And of course, that's one of the key propaganda messages of the Zionist movement today. But Zionism, Christian Zionism, predated Jewish Zionism by 4 centuries. And when the British imperialists in the early 19th century took up the idea of a Jewish state or a Jewish settlement colony in Palestine, they approached the border deputies, the British Jews, to get their support. And the border deputies in 1842 passed a resolution saying that we are opposed to the idea of a return of the Jews to Palestine, because that was the Christian message, that the Jews should return to Palestine. Now, if you believe that, what you're saying is Jews don't belong where they are, therefore they should return. And that was the common theme of anti-Semites from Wilhelm Marr in 1879, who formed the League of Anti-Semites, onwards, that Jews are strangers. And Zionism adopted that. It adopted something called the negation of the diaspora, whereby it attacked Jews in the diaspora in ways which were indistinguishable from those of anti-Semites. It actually held, in essence, that anti-Semitism was justified because the Jews, by being an exiled nation, had behaved in very antisocial and destructive ways and therefore caused enmity, which was quite justified from the non-Jews. So Zionism never opposed anti-Semitism. It saw it was impossible. Anti-Semitism was part of the non-Jewish makeup. The only answer to it was to escape anti-Semitism and form your own state in Palestine, and then do to Palestinians what had been done to the Jews. And so today, the Zionists, if they're honest, have no quarrel with genuine anti-Semitism, which is why, who are their friends? Tommy Robinson, Viktor Orban, Donald Trump, Richard Spencer, Steve Bannon, all of them. The far right overwhelmingly support the Israeli state. Douglas Murray, you name it. Yeah, I mean, there are elements of the far right who are so anti-Semitic they think Israel is a Jewish state. But apart from those, then the far right tends to support Israel. I know there are people like Tucker Carlson who are arguing it's not in America's interest to support Israel. I think he will remain in a minority, but good luck to him. But Zionism has always inherently been a form of Jewish anti-Semitism, so that's why it's so ludicrous. And our easy response to it is that there's nothing anti-Semitic about opposing genocide. or opposing starvation of children, or opposing apartheid, because that's what they're really saying.
On
If you
your earlier
oppose,
point, Tony, on your earlier one of your august predecessors was the attack on Ken Livingstone. It was in some ways the opening shot of the current wave of fake anti-Semitism, and Ken was thrown under the bus by Jeremy Corbyn. He was kicked out for daring to mention, however clumsy, but it was basically correct, for daring to mention that there had been collusion between the Zionist movement at the time and elements in the Zionist movement at the time and the Nazi Party. Now, to say that was it's as if you crapped on the floor. Everything goes silent. The piano player stops playing, and the very fact that he said that was reason to drive him into the political margins. But ever since then, it's been the same thing in a way, isn't it? To actually raise the matter is to convict yourself in the eyes of the mainstream media. So it's a totalitarian attempt to silence huge areas of history as a discussion, is it not?
oh yes, absolutely. Of course, the IHRA so-called definition of anti-Semitism, its 10th illustration of anti-Semitism, is comparisons between Israel and Nazi Germany. The fact that 57%, according to the Pennsylvania State University poll conducted by Professor Sorek, supported extermination of the Palestinians of Gaza. It said, should the Israeli army treat the Palestinians as Joshua treated the inhabitants of Jericho? 57%, going up to over 60% when they asked a secondary question, which was, is Amalek relevant today? Amalek being the tribe that allegedly attacked the Israelites in their 40-year sojourn in the Sinai desert. So you see support for exterminatory and annihilatory politics in Israel, which is actually far, far higher than was ever the case in Nazi Germany. In Nazi Germany, the Holocaust was a secret. It was a state secret. You'd be executed for betraying it. In Israel, it's open, it's out. And politicians openly talk, like Bezalel Smotrich or Kreitzer or many of the others, about razing Gaza to the ground. I mean, Smotrich said it would be moral to starve the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. Moral. Unfortunately, the world won't let us. He was wrong on that. The world leaders have let him, and starvation has been the policy of the Zionists, and of course, starvation of the Jewish ghettos under Nazi occupation was the policy of the Nazis. I mean, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, opened the campaign on October the 8th by describing the Palestinians as human animals. On October the 4th, 1943, Himmler, referring to non-Aryans, including Jews, described them as human animals. The comparisons are many. And of course, Ken Livingstone referred to Havara, the boycott of Nazi Germany by Jews throughout the world. And this was seen as an utter act of overt treachery. Most Jews instinctively boycotted anything to do with Nazi Germany. And it had severe consequences. The Nazis were extremely rattled, which was why they agreed to the trade agreement with Jewish Palestine, the Zionist organization. They didn't need to. Economically, it wasn't of much value, but politically, it was of great significance to them because it undermined the boycott campaign, which was threatening to destabilize the Nazi regime. I mean, people openly talked of the fact that the Nazi regime wouldn't last beyond the winter of 1933. What the Zionists did was come to the rescue of the Nazis. I mean, that's the reality. And that's what Edwin Black says in his book, The Transfer Agreement. The Zionists had an interest in stabilizing the position of the Nazis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a matter of history. So,
well,
how can that be anti-Semitic?
Yep, certainly worth thinking about that. A movement that's relatively modest had history taken a different tack for example, with the boycott of the Nazis. Who knows? But perhaps 50 million dead might have been avoided. Tony, somebody drew a distinction between top-down racism and bottom-up popular racism. So, for example, state-driven racism in Nazi Germany was as bad as it ever gets. But popular racism, you think you've alluded to that, was not in the same league. The Nazis had to carry out their crimes substantially in secret or with a veil drawn over them. And somebody pointed out this compares quite interestingly with America, where you could lynch black people and the good old boys would be drinking beer and having a party in public while that was happening. And the case was made, I think, persuasively, that popular racism in many parts of the USA was actually worse than it was in Germany under the Nazis. But if you look at Israel today, would you agree that both top-down racism and popular racism is off the scale and in the same category as it's ever been in other periods and times in history?
Yeah, well, I made a distinction between, if you like, feudal anti-Semitism or Christian anti-Semitism, which was tied up with it, and the state racism of Tsarist Russia, and then Nazi Germany and allied states, Romania, Slovakia, Croatia, and so on. And there's no doubt, although many thousands, many hundreds of thousands maybe of Jews died in pogroms over the centuries, the Jewish population nevertheless grew. But under Nazi Germany, two-thirds of Jews in Europe died. It certainly didn't grow. Uh, but in Israel, it is not a normal capitalist state. It's a settler colonial state. So it has a very different political economy. In essence, you have an alliance between the Israeli Jewish working class and its own ruling class. They share in common the idea that they are building a Jewish state. And there, I mean, racism is both popular and state driven. Now, if anything, probably the state driven racism is worse because it's more controlled and it's more organized, and it's also more deadly in the end. But yes, I mean, racism is extremely widespread in Israel. I mean, it is literally off the scale. I mean, 80% of Jews in one poll, it was a Pew Research poll done some years ago, said that Jews should be entitled to privileges in a Jewish state. And of course, that is true. Why else have a Jewish state if they don't have privileges? In the United States, I mean, I'm not an expert in racism in the United States, but and also the United States itself was a settler colonial state, albeit not against black people, but against the native Indians. But despite the lynchings and so on that occurred in the South, and they were, of course, very terrible, black people slowly established civil rights on their own organizations in a way that's not possible in Israel for Palestinians. So I think there is a difference, but the major point I was drawing was not in the current era. It was between popular anti-Semitism in pre-capitalist society and in capitalist society, where it's driven from the state, then it's far, far more dangerous as a rule.
A few questions coming in, Tony. What would your message be to the Scottish Green Party? And some people think, although you're way down in the South Coast, do you think the Scottish Green Party would be willing to reflect on this, be surprised at this own goal of their sister party in England and Wales? A couple of other questions, but if you just say a few words on that. It's a bit of an unfair question. Since you are an honorary member of Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, but you're observing us from afar. Any thoughts, Tony?
Well, I mean, I don't know a great deal about the Scottish Green Party, but they're in alliance with the SNP. They're pro-independence, and I know that they're a constitutional party, and I think they accept the monarchy as well. So they're they're probably politically very similar to the English and Wales Green Party. But my advice to them would be to steer clear of support for Zionism in any shape or form and not to be taken in by it. That if they want to appeal to a radical section of the Scottish voters and population, then they should be clearly anti-NATO and anti-Zionist. Uh, but as I say, I'm not a member and I'm not acquainted with them to the degree you are.
Yeah. All right then. Is there any? Did you get any support in the Green Party at the top? I think you got one vote out of 12, didn't you? This
I
is
did. I don't know who it is. It's one of the regional reps, but apart from that, no. I mean, I am told there is support, but people haven't broken cover yet. Let's put it like that.
all right,
Whether they
Tony.
will I or not, I just don't know.
So incessant smear campaigns. By the way, just full disclosure, I won't take up more than 2 minutes. But I've been on trial 4 times for anti-Semitism, 3 victories, and a setback in December, which is the subject of an appeal.
Good.
So it never ends. We had uh, lots and lots of examples of this, people being fired from universities,
Mm.
the health service being told they shouldn't wear a pin on the issue of Palestine. The
Mm.
terrible, I mean, it just seems like it's the elephant in the room, but many people don't even recognize it. That in
Mm.
virtually every school in Britain, children have been vigorously dissuaded from raising the issue of Palestine, just as they were vigorously pressured to raise the issue of Ukraine.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
absolutely, it's, I hesitate to use the word, but it's almost totalitarian the way in which every elite institution in society suppresses pro-Palestine voices. Tony, final comments for the audience here.
Well, yes, you are correct, of course. And the way they do it is by using Jewish people as the pretext. They say basically that support for Palestine, opposition to Zionism, is anti-Semitic. And I think we have to destroy that myth. That's why you can't ignore the question of anti-Semitism and state quite clearly that there is a very long tradition of Jewish anti-Zionism. Until the Holocaust, the majority of Jews were anti-Zionist. In fact, the majority of Jews who were murdered by the Nazis were not Zionists. They were anti-Zionist or non-Zionist. People don't know this, but Poland, of its 3.3 million Jews, 3 million were exterminated, which is half the number of Jews who died in the Holocaust. And in the last three elections, in Poland in 1938, 1939. In Warsaw, for example, out of 20 council seats, because Jews voted separately for their own seats, 17 were won by the anti-Zionist Jewish Workers' Party, the Bund, and just one was won by the Zionists. And overall, something like 60% of Jews voted for the Bund. The Bund captured all the major cities in Poland, and they formed an alliance with the Polish Socialist Party. Us, if you like, the war with the Nazis approached, Jews saw that Zionism offered nothing in terms of resistance to anti-Semitism, and Jewish anti-Zionism was destroyed by the Nazis in the gas chambers of Auschwitz, and the Zionists profited by that, which is why alone of the Jewish parties, the Zionists welcomed Hitler to power. They saw great advantages. Ben Gurion saw that it was only in war, only in the carnage that would develop in the Second World War, that Zionism would prosper. In times of peace, Zionism had no chance amongst the Jewish people. So, I mean, that's my message. Don't accept that if you oppose Zionism and you oppose what Israel does, that has anything whatsoever to do with Jewish people in opposition to Jews as Jews. It doesn't. And therefore, there is no reason at all that people shouldn't display symbols of Palestine and support for the Palestinians openly. It's an anti racist message. And today, of course, we see who's allying with the Zionists? It's people like Tommy Robinson. What is there not to like about an ethno-Jewish state in Palestine? I mean, that's exactly what they want to create. So it's a natural alliance as well. So, I mean, that's my closing remarks to you.
Thanks, Tony. Got a few comments in the chat. One friend points out that Greens for Palestine are hitting and fighting back
Yep.
against this prescription.
And there's a letter.
They deserve support, and it's Greens for Palestine, digit 4, greensforpalestine.uk. You can get in touch with them. We all probably know Greens. Ask them to get in touch and join that group. But we need to fight back in lots of different ways.
Yep.
Somebody who's agonizing over which party to join, Tony, it's not the main focus of this conversation, but since you're being given this welcome by the Green Party leadership, have you got any advice on what parties?
Well, I know your party in Scotland has broken off, so I hesitate to intrude into Scottish affairs, but certainly for England and Wales, my view is that Corbyn has blown it. Your party was at 18%, and now the Green Party is at 18%. By refusing to agree to lead with Zora Sultana, by refusing to recognise branches as they were set up, by insisting on controlling from the top and ignoring conference decisions, he has yet again snatched defeat out of the jaws of victory. I'm sorry about that, but that was what motivated my decision to leave. I was personally invited by a Palestinian comrade, I won't say who it is, to join the Green Party and support the drive to make anti-Zionism official party policy, and I accepted. And that's why I'm also being expelled, or why attempts are being made to expel me.
Well, we might win, we might lose if we fight. In the Green Party, in other formations, we raise the issue of freedom for
Absolutely, yes.
Palestine, and by
Yes.
fighting, we have the possibility of winning. And even if we don't win what we set out to win, we spread influence, we have a discussion, we generate debate, and that can only be in our favour. These are dangerous times, friends. We have no alternative but to fight. We fight Zionism hook, line, and sinker as an anti-Semitic genocidal movement, genocidal for Palestinians, and anti-Semitic, and quite prepared to sacrifice Jews in the interests of the Israeli state. Tony gave so many examples in his excellent book on Zionism during the Holocaust, which I warmly recommend if you haven't got a copy. But the one I think that just popped into my mind a few days ago was that during the Russian Revolution, the whites were slaughtering Jews wherever they found them. And the Zionists in London were allied with the British, who were allied with the whites. And while the whites were slaughtering Jews, the London-based Zionists kept quiet about it, did not kick up a fuss. And that's just one of so many examples of Jews being thrown under the bus whenever it suits the interests of the Zionist state.
Well,
Tony, a big thank. You want to say something else, Tony? Come on in.
Not only that, but Jabotinsky, the founder of the revisionist Zionists, actually made an alliance with Petr Yura, the leader of the White Russians, who was busy slaughtering Jews. So it's actually even worse than that. It's not simply they were supporting the British and supporting the whites. The Zionists actually held hands with them, which I think goes to show where their allegiances lie.
Thanks, Tony. I often find that when I put forward an example of what I think is the pit of horror of Zionist collaboration, Tony raises me by a bit. I'll see you and raise you, and tells me that it was actually much worse, which I agree. Tony's wearing a T-shirt. I support Palestine Action. I oppose genocide. We're not going to inflict a catwalk on you because you didn't sign up for that. But we all support Palestine Action. One of the ways in which we fight back against the fake anti-Semitism is by supporting people when they go to court. my future as a designer is very much in doubt, but this was one T-shirt which we designed for Scottish PSC. So much death due to the IDF. Of course, it's a homage to Bob Villan, but we've got a lot of orders for that T-shirt and others. Friends, thanks for joining us. I hope it's been usful.
Thank you
put
very
any
much.
questions that were not answered, if you put any questions in the chat, I'll forward them to Tony and we'll get an answer for you, guaranteed. If you're living in Scotland, or even if you're not, join Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. We won't waste your energies. Tomorrow in Glasgow, we are involved in a facsimile of the car in which Hind Rajab was murdered. That has been travelling around Scotland. It's a great opportunity to talk to people. It's life size. People see the 351 bullet holes in the car. They're supplied with information, leaflets that we produced, and it's just such a physical, irrefutable proof of the murderous and genocidal nature of the Israeli project. So that's what we're doing for the next couple of days in Glasgow. We've done it in Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Dundee. If you wish to support initiatives like that, we educate, we agitate, and we try to organise as best we can. Please get in touch and we'll be happy to take your money and your membership. Tony, thanks for joining us, but a bigger thank you even to those who have joined us as guests and listened in on this broadcast.
Well, thank you, Mick, as well, for inviting me.
It's a pleasure, Tony. As Arabs say, no thanks for the duty. Yeah. Take care, folks.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.